the Karim podcast.
Noaman, good to see you again. Thanks for joining me.
Good to see you too, buddy. Hope things are okay over there in Brazil.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. New Year's starting off pretty good. We're getting some sun after a lot of rain. How's the weather in Texas?
Oh man, it's been really volatile the past 2 or 3 weeks. So we're getting cold weather on some days and then warmer weathers on other days. So it's really messing with everyone's allergies down here. Like, for example, yesterday it got up to like 70. Right now it's like 45, 50. So
oh wow, big changes.
That's what we're dealing with. Yeah.
Growing up in Massachusetts, I can relate. I used to call it schizophrenic weather. You know, it's just
So this past week on Instagram, I did one of those Instagram stories where I put a prompt and people can respond to it. And the prompt that I put was, I asked the brothers, what do you want and or need in your future wife? Okay. Now, there were common answers, and then there were answers that were, let's say, more unique, more particular, more specific, right? So the common answers of what men generally want in their future spouse, their future wife, is they want modesty. They want their wife to be family oriented. They're looking for femininity, and they're looking for peace. And I want to break that down with you, right? Especially when it comes to femininity and peace. I think those are very important things that we should break down so that there's not any confusion around that.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are interesting responses. I'm not surprised by them. Peace, femininity, family oriented, and modesty. So peace. That's interesting, people. So what's the opposite of peace?
Chaos.
Maybe.
Always being disagreeable. I had a brother explain what he meant by peace, because I was a little confused too. Like, what do you mean by peace? And so he said, from an Islamic perspective, your spouse is supposed to be the person you find peace in. That's what a successful marriage looks like. So someone who is very reasonable, doesn't make petty arguments, understands gender roles, and is non-conflictive. A woman that has utmost trust in me and I having utmost trust in her. That was his explanation of what he means by peace. And there was another brother who also said peace, and I asked him to expand on that. And he meant, his perspective was like, look, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was a very peaceful man. You know, when you were around him, you felt like you were at peace. And the brother said that this is what your wife should be like, that she should have that presence of peace when you are around her.
I definitely can relate to that. I mean, I think all human beings want to feel good around the people they marry, you know, so tranquility, peace, a sense of safety, predictability, that's stuff that leads to more security and trust, and then attachment and bonding, you know. So I think men and women both want that, honestly, that sense of peace and sense of tranquility, you know. In other words, you want to feel nicer when you come home, or the other person comes home, or both of you come home. And we shouldn't use each other as punching bags emotionally, right? We sometimes won't realize this, but we'll do it, you know. Work's bothering me, I take it out on my spouse. Kids are annoying, I take it out on my spouse. So peace, of course, I think includes safety and predictability, right? In other words, you don't want to come home, this concept of walking on eggshells or not knowing when the next bomb will blow up or whatever, that's natural, right? But this also has a lot to do. So I'll say something else that I think is more important. So when you were sharing the response, I appreciate the response from the people you asked, but this concept of like, from the Islamic perspective, someone should be, and then we go and define it, right? I guess, you know, I understand where they're coming from, where there's a standard, right? You need a standard for things. But I also know, as someone who's been in had a lot of relationship experience, worked with many relationships. It's not as simple as just saying, here's what I want, or what we should be, or someone should be like, right? Peace, for example, comes more from a self-aware or self-conscious, presence with the self first, and then the relationship, and you actually work towards things, to bring peace. It's a unified effort. And for those of us that aren't married listening, most of you don't realize the first several years of your life with a spouse, when you first get married, especially if you're both living at home with your parents, and then you go into that, there's going to be a lot of adjustment, a lot of even sometimes turbulence as well as tribulation, because we come out of our families, Noman, typically with these ideas, right, about marriage or about a spouse. But when you get into experiencing it, it ends up being very different, right? And so when I say I want my wife to respect me, I think any man would say that, right, including myself. Sure. But how do we then have the conversation? We also have to have the conversation of, what does it take for a man to earn a woman's respect, right? I want peace. I want my wife to be peaceful, to be a positive energy or a light energy. Okay, what's my role in ensuring that feminine sun can burn in such a way rather than consume me in her flames? Has a lot to do with me, the masculine, too, right? Sure. But that's why I think as we go through these, hearing what men want and need, as we reflect on them, maybe we can also try to consider that a very masculine thing is, you want something, you forge it and make it happen. You don't whine about another person not being the way you want, right? And so naturally, of course, sometimes when you're courting somebody, there's going to be red flags up front, like personality clashes, right? But a lot of these things, if we really want them in our marriage, an application, there's definitely more to it than we come in with our definitions, and we expect people to just kind of fit these molds. And if they don't, like, because again, I see a lot of conflicts between people around, they're attached to ideas about things rather than dealing with how things actually are with them as a couple. It's a different setting, right?
Yeah. Just to touch up on the point you made about men do want to be respected by their wives, right? Every guy wants to be respected by his girl. And it's like you said, the question is, what is that guy doing to earn that respect? And I feel the answer is this, right? If you want to earn respect by your girl, you have to learn how to lead. You've got to take initiative. You've got to be assertive. You have to be sure of yourself. You have to have self-confidence. Like, all of these things go into earning respect from your girl, because your girl's not just going to give you respect if you're just some guy who has low self-esteem, he's not sure of himself, no confident, doesn't know how to take risks. Like, you're not going to earn the respect, man. No woman's going to respect you, let alone no guy will respect you,
Right. Every time you get into a fight with your wife, you call your mom.
Oh my God.
Right. Those things happen.
Oh man. Yeah. And with the guy's perspective, when it comes to peace, like us wanting that tranquility, and I believe you can speak on this as well. Whenever a guy comes home from work, right, he's married, he comes home from work. I think for us guys, we just want to like take a couple minutes and just decompress from the workday. Like, whether that's like sitting on the couch for 5 to 10 minutes and doing nothing. And that may or may not upset a girl. That may or may not upset that guy's wife, right? But it's just a way for us to just decompress, like let our mind relax for a few minutes before we trudge on throughout the rest of the day, like get back into the day of like finishing whatever routine or tasks we have ahead of us.
Right. Well, here's what's interesting is you've never been married, right? And I am married. I've been married before. And then I have the work relationship experience. So when you look at these words that the brothers shared kindly, and you think about them as a single guy, you have ideas and a vision, right? So when you say it to me, I understand the vision, but then like what you just told me, I'm like, yeah, that's definitely true. But here's a lot of other ways that can go. Like some dads like to come home and play with their kids. They don't want quiet and decompression. Some guys want to go home and, kiss and hug their wives while she's in the kitchen first. Right? Then they may go to their room and change and lie down and maybe pray or come out for dinner later, right? Some guys come home, they don't want to see anybody. They want everyone in their room with the doors closed, quiet. And I want to eat my meal alone and watch my Jazeera or my Netflix, right? So the reality is, right, that's the point, is when you actually look at how it's applied, it's very different, right? But for example, if a person is in a situation where they do come home to what they describe as something chaotic, right? The house is a mess. The kids are screaming, running all over the place, or they're watching TV really loud and yelling and playing on their iPads at the same time. And I'm trying to sit down and have a dinner, right? And my wife doesn't care about that. I've told her many times, like, it'd be great if you could maybe organize this to be a little more chill when I come home just for this or that. And she's just like, what? It's not my problem. I have to deal with them all day. I'm not going to do this for you too, right? Now that gets into a point of, okay, tension. You know what I mean? But even so, a man who wants something, like in the case where his situation is chaotic and he wants peace, and we're using just this example of coming home after work as a example, right?
Sure.
He has to figure out ways to initiate more of what he wants. He can't just ask for something. And typically, I want you or need you to respect me or do this or do that. But the whole time I'm angry or avoidant, I'm not initiative. I don't take, a role or part in it. I don't give suggestions. I don't try to figure out how do I make it easier on her so she can make this aspect of my life easier. Like that's actually what ends up really happening when you decide I have to live with this person for decades and have children with them. Nobody is going to, there's a point where it gets beyond like, I don't care what you think. I care about what you do, right? And how you do it. So it's very applied marital life. So a lot of us have great ideals, sometimes very lofty concepts, like how we just picture we're going to walk into some program of a Muslim marriage based on our definitions, and it'll just kind of run that software. But the reality is that never goes like that. You always have to test and tweak and work out a bunch of, kinks and, blocks along the way, right? It's just how it goes for people.
How would
that make sense?
It does. And my follow-up question to that, for a Muslim guy listening to this, he's single, he's trying to get married. How does he test out his ability to do these things, to be sort of, let's say, to take initiative with a girl, to show leadership, to play a role, like, because courting can only take it so far. A lot of courting is surface level up until a certain point until it moves into the nikah stages. And then with the nikah stages, there's a bit more flexibility, but they're still truly not living together. So how does a guy sort of take these things and apply them?
Well, look, there's certainly the training that happens with the feminine itself, right? And then there's the qualities and traits I need as a man that are actually being exercised out in every aspect of my life that will naturally be applied with my wife, right? So if I'm a person who expresses myself, communicates, tries to be self-aware, I journal, I don't just shut up and listen to everything my parents say when I'm 25 and live with them. I actually sometimes will politely say I disagree, or I'm not going to do this or that. These are things you're supposed to be practicing beforehand, right? A lot of us think we just listen to mom and dad, everything they do. We're 25, we get married and go ship off into starting our life. You have 2 kids getting married, essentially, right? In mentality. And sometimes they never cut that umbilical cord either, right? I mean, if you've got couples who are professionals, well-educated, in their 40s, 50s, and they still argue about your mommy makes you do this, what does that tell us, right? That there's still some level of, sometimes the individual isn't really, in the case of a male, he's still acting like a boy in some ways, and sometimes he's acting like a man, and other ways, he's blind to, and so forth. And the same could be true for the woman. But I think that, first of all, nowadays, I think a lot of us will try to court sisters because we have these apps now, right? So you could literally kind of date online. Let's just call it what it is, right? Like there's a woman or a guy I'm talking to every day. I'm getting to know him. There's some excitement. It goes for a couple of months. It may fade out. It may not, right? Sometimes we're doing that with more than one person. So a lot of that has some level, if you are taking those things seriously, that's all training, right? And so exhibiting confidence, being able to voice or talk about your values, not getting offended when someone doesn't agree, all of that are things you can actually practice in a courting situation, which is going to help you be more stable or predictable, let's say, in your relationship, right? So, for example, if a big one that comes up from single people I've coached, the discussion around the man is the caretaker of women or the captain, right? Like this ayah in the Quran that's, controversial from a feminist lens, let's say,
Sure.
This is a hard conversation to have with some Muslim sisters that you're trying to marry. But, and sometimes what I hear even from the women is the guy typically will have like the token response, right? Of, well, I'm the one who has to ultimately be the captain or the one who's in charge, right? And the woman will often say, why? And he'll just go, because I'm the man, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, that's all true. But the reality is this woman will never actually see you as a man and give you that respect and really feel like you're the caretaker of her until you apply it. It's all fluff and terminology until you apply it. And even during courtship, you can see signs of it not being applied.
Yes.
Right? So you need to respect me, blah, blah. And then, okay, great. When are you going to talk to my father? Oh, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, this guy's not, he's full of it. Right? Or everything, everything he tells me, it's because his mom tells him to tell him. He doesn't even have a barrier. Like he's still enmeshed with his mom, right? A woman's not going to respect you. She's not going to say, okay, I'm signing up for you to be the captain, right? Because women naturally also have to be smart, right? They can't just sign up for somebody who just has a lot of the nice token answers. But then when you ask why, or what about in this situation or that situation, or what do you mean by that, or how does it work? And I'm not against this concept per se, right? If you look at any successful company, there's always in the end one person who's ultimately in charge. And every single corporation in business, there's no such thing as two captains. That's just how hierarchy works, right?
Yep.
And so it's no different in family. But today, because of the socio-cultural political time we're in, I think men can't just rely on this is the tradition and this is what Islam says. And so therefore you have to be aligned and just totally molded to fit into that once I marry you, or else it's, a big problem and you're, it's like, it's not that simple is my point.
Yeah.
Because if you're marrying a woman who's a doctor or a pharmacist or has a PhD in physics, and she's been on her, actually taking care of a lot of the stuff on her own. Let's say she's lived abroad and she's actually provided for herself. You can't approach a woman in that same woman in the same way as a woman who's, let's say, kind of waiting at home to get married. She's not working and she's still with her parents, but all she wants is to get married and have a family. It's a very different mentality.
Yes.
So men have to think also about the variation of things and not just take kind of here's my list and I'm just going to spew it across every woman I talk to and see which one fits into it. Like, that's not how you find out compatibility. It's actually about engaging the topics and making meaning of it together, or realizing once you've understood the meaning each of you make around them, whether or not it's going to click or practically work. Because in the end of the day, if it can't be applied, it's just nice things we think or say or wish. That's it. Right?
Yeah. That's why I'm a huge supporter of courting, Kareem. Like, truly I am, And yeah, there was a point in my life where when I was younger, I would tell myself like, no, it's wrong to do that. Like, this is embarrassing. But I used to say like, man, it's not right for a Muslim guy and girl to go to a coffee shop to get to know each other, right? But again, that's not practical. It doesn't take into consideration what people have grown up with, what they're comfortable with. And look, things have changed, but although things have changed, you can still hold true to your principles. Doesn't mean that you let go of whatever you truly believe to be true and what you hold dear to your heart, what you find valuable. You don't let go of those things just because, say, culture is a bit different from back home, right? Yeah, with courting, excuse me, you can't knock it until you try. Like, you can't just have all these ideals within your head and meet some girl through your family or something and expect her to be like the one, and she's going to understand everything you have to offer and bring to the table and what your needs and demands are. It's like, no, it doesn't work like that at all. You have to go out there and court these sisters. You have to get to know them to a certain extent, right? So you have to get your feet wet. You really do. And especially for the young guys like myself, we're single, we're living at home, you know, or even the brothers who are, let's say, not living on their own, they have their own apartment. We need to start practicing these things now. Like, we're doing it now. This is the best time to do it, to practice these.
It's your training. It's your relationship training. If you don't, how else are you going to get relationship training? Right.
Right. And
but
your relationship with your mother is one of those key relationships in your life that could determine what your relationship with the feminine would look like in the future, especially like your wife, to a certain extent. Your relationship with your siblings, with your father, your relatives, like all of that are key components in what you'll treat your spouse like one day. And so again, the training starts now. Like, you shouldn't be waiting until you get married to start training. You start the training now, even if it's premarital counseling.
Right. And I just want to clarify a couple of things. So one is, by courting, as we've just defined before, we talked about an intentional process to get to know another for the purposes of marriage, right? And so in my, like, I have 3 daughters and a son. So when I even think about how I'd break it down for them, I'd say, look, obviously first phase would be the person comes to the house, right? Spends time with us. Like, if it's a guy courting my daughter, just observing that. Second phase is you can go out with a guy, but only in groups. So either you take your sister, your brother, you're going out with a bunch of friends, and you're coming home with your sister and brother, and you get to hang out with them and get to know them. And not everything is under the, view of mom and dad, but it has to be up first, right?
Yes.
Because you've got to do your scanning, right? Then you get to group. Once group keeps going and time goes by and the person seems more formal, official, then in every Muslim culture, there's this concept of getting engaged, right? Which isn't technically Islamic, but it's practical in the sense of it tries to help our Muslim culture, and tradition still be honored along the way for those who aren't going to get married within a month or two, and they're still going to get to know each other, or now they want to find a comfort zone where both families have basically said, yes, you guys are locked in with each other off the market, and now you're gonna, you may go out now to a coffee shop, or you're gonna pick her up and take her to the local, halakha group, and then drop her off or something. Again, depending on the situation, I wouldn't do those things at night, because remember, being alone, that by definition is when you can't see anybody else and no one else can see you. So if you're in your car when it's dark at night, and you're driving, on a street where there's no lights, or you're just parked in some parking lot, no one can actually see you, and you can't see anybody because no one's around, right? That's actually alone.
Coffee with Karim podcast.